You're listening to the Cardinal Corner Podcast.
I can promise I went 50% on these currents, and I would not be surprised if they fell down right now because I don't think the command tape is gonna hold.
Oh man.
So maybe not everything.
Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Nah, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
Time will tell.
Should we get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Let's jump into it. All right. Welcome to the Cardinal Corner Podcast, the only book club where reading's not required. Today we're talking about the book Thirst by Scott Harrison, also co-written by Lisa Sweetingham. Sweetingham. So we finished the book. Actually, the full title is Thirst, A Story of Redemption, Compassion, and a Mission to Bring Clean Water to the World. So we finished that on Saturday, I think. Do you know the date?
It was June 10th.
June
my
10th?
Dad's birthday. Shout out to my pops.
Oh, heck yeah. Happy birthday, Chase's dad. Hopefully he hears that.
Yeah, I hope he does.
And so today we're just going to talk about our thoughts, our takeaways, how inspired we felt, some things we liked, didn't like, and at the end we're going to announce the new book. So let's just jump into it. Why don't you start us off?
Okay. Well, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the book and kind of the logistics of what he had to go through to start his charity, and then I think we'll get into some of the deeper stuff
Sure.
a little bit later. But here's a quick like TLDR. If you didn't read, this is your brief summary. Scott Harrison was a nightclub promoter, one of the best in New York City. Worked from the ground up in this industry, which I'll say an industry that I did not even really knew existed.
I didn't either.
Degree that it exists. It's an industry of connections and relationships and making the coolest things happen for the coolest people and making sure that the coolest people show up to those things. Very, very crazy life. His time there full of drugs and alcohol and a lot of things that later in life he would leave behind. But one day he decides that his life is meaningless, which is, I'm sure, something that everyone has thought every now and then. But he really decided to do something about it and went and applied to work for a charity. I can't remember the name of the charity off the top of my head. Mercy Ships. Thank you. Floating hospital, basically a cruise ship, but
massive.
A hospital. Massive operation.
Not a vacation.
No, not at all. And he learned about nonprofit life and all that goes into charity and donations, and then finally bringing the help to the people that need it. All that inspired him to start his own charity called Charity Water, which I think it was the one, right, that pioneered the 100% donation model, or perfected it, I think.
Yeah.
So every cent that you donate to the cause for Charity Water actually goes towards giving people water. It doesn't go towards the salary of any employee at the charity. And he talks a lot about how he got there. And that was one of the most interesting things about the book and his story, was how tenacious he was in setting up the charity in such a way that he felt good about, especially coming from where he came, right? He was like this nightclub promoter, and all that they cared about was parties, making the coolest making money. And he flipped the script entirely and said, okay, how can I literally make use of 100% of a donation? Someone gives me $2.50, that every cent of that actually goes towards helping someone with getting clean water. Like, that's crazy that he was able to pull it off.
Absolutely. It's a logistic miracle. And the fact that he was able to find people who are willing to donate for the overhead, people who are willing to donate because that's how it operated. Public donations were 100% for wells and for training and for all that stuff, for providing clean water. But then private donations were mostly for overhead and for paying salaries for designers and workers and all that stuff. And so just the fact that he figured that out is incredible. But I love that he needed to make a 100% change in his life. He literally wanted everything about himself to be different. And I think it was to feel like his redemption was true. You know what I mean? He wanted to feel like that was that had happened. And so he gave 100% of the money away. And I mean, he's living in his buddy's apartment, and their office is like in that guy's living room, and they have to leave when he comes home from parties. You know what I mean? And like, it's insane that he had such a meaningful and existing change, the one that persevered, throughout the years. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I loved how like open he was too about the struggles of achieving that dream. Like he talks about basically that it's crazy to do what he did, especially with the 100% model that he committed to. He's like, most other charities don't do this because it's extremely difficult to do. But he was also very open with everybody that supports him privately. Like they know exactly what they're doing. And they know that their donation to sustain the charity is just as meaningful as the donations that go to the people that get the clean water, right? Like it has to happen somehow. And just his commitment to that, I think, was very inspiring. Commitment to anything, but obviously Scott, he commits and he does what he does.
He's
and he
like
does it well.
He's going 100%.
I wish I could be half the man that Scott Harrison was. Maybe someday I'll be like him. I want to be like him when I grow up, Robert, for real.
Oh man. Well, I love how he shared the details of the journey. And when you're reading it for the first time, it feels a little awkward at the beginning. You start to wonder, why is he sharing his story from when he's 4 years old?
Yeah.
And why is he telling us about how much liquor costs at his nightclubs? And why is he telling us about these little details? Even his time at Mercy Ships, what does that have to do with charity water, right? But it is all a reflection and a commentary, and we've talked about this a little bit, but it's all a reflection of what's to come. And it explains why what he's doing is so meaningful. It talks about the mountains he had to climb, and about how personal it was to him. For example, and we brought this up, but his mom was so sick, she needed to find clean water to drink from a spring that they had to travel to, fill up little gallon jugs and bring it back to his mom so she could drink water without getting sick. And then, 15 years later, what's he doing? He's watching these people who have to travel to find water, but they are getting sick, and so he has to give them a location to find a spring that will give them water that won't make them sick. It's just this beautiful full circle moment where you're just realizing, oh my goodness, I mean, this is a lesson that he learned when he was 4. You know what I mean? And as he grew up, that traveled to the end of his life.
Yeah, he started learning it that early, right? But the whole thing paints a picture of the context needed to make his commitment mean something different than just some random dude starting a random charity because he wants to do something randomly good. It's different from that, and I think that's why the book hit home for both you and I. Is you can't help but feel for Scott and his life, and you can't help but feel for the people that he helps. He, name drops probably 30 different people and tells their story. And, granted, it's a brief version of their story, but you feel like you are getting a peek into these people's lives who, prior to receiving the water and the help from charity water, didn't have access to something that you and I take for granted every day. And it all just comes together. The book was amazing, right? It all comes together in the end in the best way. And so I think that's one of the things that I loved most about the book.
Absolutely. If people who are listening can't gather this, we loved the book.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and dare I say, it's my favorite book I've read in a long time. It completely changed me. And that doesn't happen often. And I'm an open guy, and I like listening, and I like changing, and I like, learning. But this one was different. I mean, it was like my soul was prompted to change, to be more compassionate, to embrace empathy, to seek after understanding. It was amazing. And we were going over this section before, and we're talking about, what were our favorite things and what are some things we didn't like. And I sat there for 2-3 minutes trying to come up with something I didn't like, and I really couldn't. Any perceived faults ended up having a payoff at the end. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the beginning, I thought it was slow, and I was like, oh man, did we pick a weird book? But then at the end, I'm crying. And I'm like, this is like his mom, and like, oh my gosh, he changed. It was such a wonderful book. It's hard to pick one of anything. Favorite, not favorite. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, and that's that part exactly. If I were to pick a least favorite thing about the book, it's that it did its job too dang well, and it made me feel so many emotions. And that's hard sometimes. And I think as a stubborn and prideful man, I don't like feeling some things sometimes, especially sadness and compassion. And but it made me tear up. It made me feel for these people in a real way, and made me want to change and actually do something, and to help contribute to this cause even. And so, like, but that's not a fault, right? Like, it literally did its job perfectly, so it's not a bad thing. The pictures that it shows in the book, there's like a whole section where it shows all these images, and some of them are like gut wrenching. Some of the illnesses that they were trying to cure on mercy ships. Yeah, it was graphic, and it again makes you uncomfortable when you look at it, but that's the point. It's to show you that this stuff is really happening, and that there are real things that you can do to help with things that big. But I love that ideology also trickles down to the small things every day that we can do for other people. It makes you think about topics like just being compassionate, being understanding to those around you who are going through hard times, whether you know them or not, taking the time to see how you can help those around you.
Absolutely.
And these big ideas that I know a lot of people want to do, but it is definitely not natural that everyone is just perfect at that, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of hate, there's a lot of judgment in the world, and I think we could all use a little bit more compassion and understanding and charity and giving.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. His diction and the way that he provides these stories is supposed to make you uncomfortable. It reminds me of this experience I had in high school, and we read the book 12 Years a Slave. Have you read that book before?
No, but I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
Really just incredible, gut-wrenching story of a slave who was educated, but of course he was African-American, so they made him a slave, and he just had to endure 12 years of being a slave, and it was awful. She, the teacher says there's a movie, and we're going to let you watch it as well if you'd like. Just a warning, though, it's pretty graphic. And I ended up watching it, and we came back to class and we talked about it. And there were some students that hated the movie because it was so
it's gross and
intense.
Oh, it's so mean.
Absolutely. And warning to anyone who does watch it, it is very intense. It's very graphic, and it breaks your heart. And there's one scene in particular, and just a warning, this was a really intense scene, but he's hung on a tree, but his feet barely can touch the ground. So he's not dying, but he's surviving. He's touching, like, with the tips of his toes, he's managing to stay alive. And the shot lingers on this scene of him gasping for breath, struggling for so long. And you're watching there and you're squirming, and you're like, when is this going to end? And some students were like, I hated that scene. Why did they have to do it like that? It was so uncomfortable. And I was like, booyah, that's the point.
Yeah.
You were supposed to squirm like he was. You were supposed to feel this, when is this going to end, just like he was, right?
Yeah.
That's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of sharing messages, right? So now I think of Thirst. I think of this very intense story that he shares, especially of, the young woman who commits suicide. It's a very hard story to read. But that's the point, right? We're supposed to feel that just like how they would feel. We're supposed to mourn the way that her parents mourned, right? We hear about her mom who threw herself against the wall when she heard about her daughter's passing and scarred her back and permanently messed up her back. That's really hard to read. That's really disturbing. But that's the point. We're supposed to be like, we're supposed to feel the injustice. We're supposed to feel how unfair that is. Anyways, I think Scott did that masterfully. I don't want to go on that for so long and make this whole podcast about that, but the stories all served a purpose. They all meant something. They all called you to act. They all shared a feeling and an emotion that was deeper than just saying, this was hard.
Yeah.
It was deeper than that. So I loved it.
And I think there's something to learn from how Scott specifically used those things for good, right? He started out as a photographer for mercy ships, and he would also write stories for them. And that's kind of where he found his groove in the charity world, was how can I market this thing to people? You literally have to sell the idea of giving to people. And he found that stories were extremely effective at that. And I remember him mentioning that story specifically about the woman that committed suicide because she dropped her water, right? That was what happened. I think she was on the way back, right? She walked miles and on the way back, dropped the pot. And that's, she couldn't handle it because she knew that that's what her family needed to survive. And Scott was so entranced by that story that he wanted to find out, first of all, if it was real, because he didn't know if it was just myth, if it was local legend, or if it was, just something that somebody said. He went out, found the story, and used that as a tool to inspire change in people, to inspire somebody to say, hey, I've never donated to charity before, or I've never even thought about, donating to help somebody get clean water. But that story did the thing that they needed to make that change. And so,
absolutely.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. There's just one thing about that I just love. And it was him explaining that this was deeper than water. This was more than water. Yes, this young girl was going to get water that was probably dirty and it probably would make them sick. But it was also a lesson in, as he's hearing this legend of this woman who committed suicide because she dropped the pot of water. Well, he finds out it was a young woman. What was she, 13 or something? 13 years old.
I think she was younger than 20.
Yeah,
for sure.
She was very young. And she was tasked with walking for hours every day, right, to go get water. That alone is terrible. And they're going up and down big ravines. Scott actually had the girl's friend lead him to that place, right?
Yeah, he walked the path.
Absolutely. And he said it was terrible. It was treacherous for a grown man. Nothing about this young woman with a very fragile clay pot. She's walking to get the water. She gets the water. It's so difficult. It's so important for their family. She drops the pot, and it's so tragic that she cannot imagine living longer anymore. And she can't imagine facing the shame. And what he's saying is it's deeper than water. It's about young women and children and families who are losing time in their life walking for something that's a basic human need. It's about how crucial it becomes in someone's life that it leads to something so tragic like suicide. It's about the weight that this carries, this task of getting clean water. It's more than drinking dirty water, right? It's not like, oh, yeah, they need clean water because it'll taste better. It's way deeper than that. It's about everything. I mean, he even talks about women who feel beautiful because they finally have clean water. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
That's so important. And so again, these stories are so good at conveying deeper meanings. It's not about just the water. It's not about just the liquor that he sold. It's about deeper things that motivate us to change. So
yeah, no, I think I'm so glad you brought that up. Right, Scott is a master of story, and he's a master of people, and he illustrated, I think, a master class in how to use those things to inspire change and inspire goodness in people.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, what do you think we can learn from that about how to use story and people to, actually inspire change and good in people, like to bring out the good in people? Because I think everybody's got it in them.
Yeah.
But yeah, what can we learn from Scott from that, do you think?
Well, it's so funny. I was just about to ask you the same thing.
Wow, we're
And
reading each
so
other's minds.
right. I want to hear your answer as well right
Okay.
after I say
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
But it does remind me of his stories of raising money. He goes and experiences the tragedies, and he takes those key moments that convey the message, and he brings it to these really lavish, really elaborate dinner parties, right? Galas, everyone's dressed in tuxedos and they're at beautiful places. And what does he show them? He puts a VR headset on them and he shows them someone suffering that they can connect with. It's like, whoa, is this guy
move.
yeah, that's a power move if I've ever seen one. But on this VR headset, there's going to be someone asking you for help who's similar to you.
Yeah.
Incredible. So anyways, again, he's so good at using story to communicate something. Now, I think obviously he uses it to advocate for others. I also think it's important to advocate for ourselves. And I don't want to get selfish, but it's important that we take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need to share our stories. We need to communicate what we're struggling with and use story as a means to feel heard and to feel understood and to experience empathy for ourselves. Again, we're supposed to turn outward and we're supposed to be compassionate, but that doesn't mean we neglect ourselves. That doesn't mean we feel like we're not worthy to feel understood. So that was just one big takeaway. And it's just funny how your question kind of brought that up. But yeah, we can use story to feel heard ourselves and to feel, to help others be motivated to help us maybe, or to ask for help. We share our story, something like that. So it's just really, it's such a powerful tool. Stories are incredible, both for helping others, for asking for help, for feeling understood, all those things. So I want to hear yours now. I was gonna ask you the same thing. Let's hear it.
Sure. I think my thoughts are very similar to yours. I was thinking about not specific examples, but just when people approach me with something, or when I approach people with something that I need help with, or they're reaching out for advice, or if I'm reaching out for advice, I've been thinking about how much more meaningful something is when you get to know the context and the story behind it all. I'm trying to think if I have a specific example from my life. I'm having trouble at the moment, but
Sure.
I just know that I appreciate it when someone tells me their story, right?
Yeah.
When they tell me it, and it helps me understand them better. It helps me know how to help better. And this works in any type of relationship, I think. This is like close relationships, like a spouse or a parent. But I also think in more distant acquaintances, even business relationships, or just necessary relationships where you're stuck with somebody and you don't care to understand them. Giving someone the opportunity to tell their story and to actively listen and to feel compassion and to help them feel heard is really the first step towards being what they need in that moment.
Absolutely.
Because you really learn about them and you stop caring about whatever the problem is. The problem is just a problem at that point. It's not about the problem, it's about a person. And I think that just prompts much better conversations. It prompts better solutions. It prompts better and more open negotiation, even like what we talked about on our last book episode. Any type of thing where you can involve a true, obviously, story and not just lying to people.
Absolutely.
is a great opportunity to practice listening and hearing what people need.
So funny you bring up Never Split the Difference, because I was just about to say, they go hand in hand. It's so
in a
funny.
weird way.
Yeah, on paper or at face value, maybe they don't kind of correlate, but my goodness, they're they're the same type of book. It's all about developing empathy and understanding people better, right? And for Chris Voss, it was to negotiate and to help others come to a peaceful conclusion. And for Scott Harrison, it led to a charity and it led to serving others. So it's just really funny how powerful empathy is. Is a string that's been threaded through all these books that we're reading, you know? I mean, even Matthew Walker, he shows so much empathy with people who struggle to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a really wonderful thing. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
I heard that.
You heard that? I'm about to talk.
I don't want to move past that.
No, I was just going to mention how different of a book Thirst was from the other books that we've read in Cardinal Corner so far. We definitely didn't want to brand ourselves or position ourselves as like just a self-help book club, because I think that books and learning is so much more than that. If we're talking about a story, we're talking about more than just, hey, this is a textbook on how to sleep better. Thirst is not a textbook about how to live life. It's not a self-help book. It's not even like it's not even really encouraging change in yourself. Like he doesn't say like, hey, if you haven't given to charities in the past, that's something you need to change about yourself.
Right.
That's just not how what the book is. But by nature of the masterpiece of a story that it is, it makes you feel those things. And it makes you want to be better, which is one of the reasons that I love it so much. It's almost like the best kind of self-improvement, the kind that is natural and prompted by reality and by real people and real stories. So that was just a thought I had about how different it was from the other books, and how we can really learn from anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really from anything.
It's so, I mean, we've talked about that ever since we started the book club, when we talked about, while we were forming it, what do we want this book club to be? And one of our first most prominent values was, we can learn something from anything.
Yeah.
Like that phrase exactly. Like something can be learned from anything. So a memoir about someone who starts a charity, a textbook about sleep, right? We can absorb really meaningful messages, and our life can be changed. So
yeah.
So can we jump into the follower insights? Because we've got a really good one this time.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I share this one?
Please do.
Because I actually was talking with a good friend of ours, and he's also one of our biggest fans.
Yeah.
We freaking love him. If he's listening to this, you know who you are. We love you. So I was just asking him about the book. He read it really quick, and I asked him, what stood out to you? And his message was about some of the Christian and spiritual aspects of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to preface this, I read some of the reviews of the book, and there was some distaste and some disagreements with the spiritual elements of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I could understand if you felt misled or if you didn't expect that. But I will say he does it very tastefully, and it's simply a very important part of his story. And if he were to redact it, it would not be authentic and it would not be genuine to his story. And so I appreciated that he was willing to share it, and he was willing to say, hey, whether you like it or not,
this is what it was.
Christianity was a motivator for me, and it was a big part of this experience. So Michael talks about that a little bit in his thoughts. So
Michael's the person that said this comment.
Yes.
Awesome.
So he said a couple of things I loved. First, I loved the way that when people turn to God, he allows them to use their unique talents for good. Like Scott's years of clubbing or club promoting allowed him to showcase charity in a way that would appeal to a wider range of people, which, first of all, is a brilliant thought. This is me speaking now. Like, Michael's exactly right. He was able to use, and spiritual or not, you can use your talents in so many meaningful ways. If you're an incredible artist, you can use it in a meaningful way. If you're great at engineering, you can use your talents in a meaningful way. So,
yeah.
First of all, that was a great thought. And then he says the idea of focus on the individual, and how that's how Scott helped people. And he says that is how Christ heals and helps us. It isn't a numbers thing. It was comforting and healing on a personal level. So again, Scott is great at making it individual and making it one-to-one. And then finally he says the Rachel story, and we'll kind of go over the Rachel story in a little bit. The Rachel story had him bawling in the car. In fact, he said, the Rachel story had me bawling in the car, dude. It's wild how a story about a girl I never met reminded me of the goodness that could be found in mankind. We'll talk about that story a little more, but just such a, I mean, again, this is a buddy of ours, and he's being vulnerable and saying, hey, this made me cry. And I experienced the same thing. I cried like a baby listening to this book. In fact, it was really awkward. I was listening to the book, pulling up to a job interview, and I was in the parking lot sobbing, and I saw him get out of his car, the CEO of this company, get out of his car and walking into the store, and I was like, oh, crap. I'm about to walk in with red eyes and tear-stained cheeks, and I'm going to have to explain to him it was about Rachel, right? So,
Yeah.
anyways, tell me what your thoughts are on Michael's message here.
I love it. I think that his thought, especially about what Scott did, literally translating something in his life that he considered a weakness at one point, which was his life of drugs, alcohol, and partying. At some point, he determined that that was not the kind of person he wanted to be. And from that point, you have a decision to make. Will you let that weakness tear you down and keep you where you are? Or will you let it spin into a strength? And so I just love that about what Michael had to say, because that's the whole book, right? He used the skills that he developed doing this thing that he now considers vile and a terrible way to spend your time. But those were the skills that got him to build a successful charity.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this then, because you're a man of many talents.
All right.
So have there been any that you've had to repurpose or have redeveloped or changed with different meaning before? Kind of like Scott.
Sure. No, that's a good question. Let me think about it for a second. I'm thinking right now about a summer I did where I did door-to-door sales, and I'll save you the sob story, but essentially I did not have a good time. But I learned a lot. And one of my greatest, what I would consider weaknesses on that particular summer was I felt like I had an inability to push these people to purchase something that I inherently knew that they should not buy. So I was selling satellite and cable TV to people. And here's my Scott Harrison context. My parents never had cable. Like, we just never had TV. And when I got there I was in Oklahoma, Eastern Oklahoma, and I was seeing, we had our price sheet with like, okay, if you watch Westerns, sorry, bud, that's an extra $80 a month if you like Cowboys. Or if you like sports, if you like NFL and you want the NFL Sunday ticket,
Cop it up.
It is a lot of money, especially for the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the living class that I was talking with, right? Like, we're talking in the real estate world, they consider it like a C and D class neighborhood, which is crappy houses, crappy living situations. People are sometimes very interesting character-wise, and
this
doing
is who you were told
things. And these, yeah. Oh, we were told to go and sell to the people that barely passed the credit check. We didn't want a 5-star credit. We wanted 2-star, because they were more likely to buy. They were easier to be influenced, and they were an easier sell, right? This wasn't people that were well off. These were people that were struggling. And I had people that I roomed with and people that were around me. And then I want to preface this by saying, I don't think they're bad people, right? They were doing their job and they were doing it well. But they were very good at selling to those types of people. And again, I'm not trying to put myself on some kind of moral pedestal here and say like, I was just too good to sell to these people. Like, I just couldn't do it. But that's also not entirely untrue. Like, I really had a hard time with that. And at the moment, it was a weakness in my ability to complete my job. I did not make enough money to sustain my living expenses. That was a real weakness in my life at that time, was the ability to say, no, I'm doing this job. I need to just do what I'm supposed to do. So I don't know if I have a specific example to what that's translated into now, but it has helped me determine what I want to do in life. I know I want to help people, or at least provide useful service to people, and not in a transaction, give someone something that they don't truly need. And yeah, the cherry on top of it all would be finding a way to solve people's problems or finding a way to serve those around me. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but that experience was pivotal in me determining what I wanted not to do. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Heck yeah.
that's the thing I can come up with on the spot.
No, that I did put you on the spot, and that was a perfect response. That was a beautiful allegory for change and repurposing skills and talents. So I love that, and
Yeah.
and that's a terrible experience. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that, because
It really
that is
wasn't
hard.
that terrible. It was just hard. And I guess to even tie it more into your original question, right? Like
Sure.
the skills that I learned there were valuable skills, right? Like I was learning how to talk to people. I was learning how to sell things to people. I was learning how to find out like the source of a problem, right? Like if someone didn't want to buy DirecTV, they had a reason. Usually it was financial, but sometimes it was that their neighbor hated DirecTV and they like, created like a blood pact or something that they would never buy DirecTV, and then you have to overcome that thing. So
Have to break the bond.
yeah, break the bond or something. But I mean, yeah, so that skill, those
Interesting.
skills that I learned, I definitely didn't perfect them there, but I'm, in the process of trying to find out how I can use those skills of talking to people and finding out their problems, but actually doing something good with it rather than selling them, $300 a month packages on cable that they probably couldn't afford and shouldn't
Yeah.
buy.
Yeah, this is a personal note, but cable TV is wild.
Oh,
I mean, with streaming services nowadays, you get a bundle or something, you get a student discount on Netflix. I mean, cable
Wild.
is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been
Yeah.
watching the NBA Finals this past week. Also, congrats to the Nuggets, by the
Yep.
way, and my boy
Good job,
Jokic and
Jokic.
Murray. But they have the commercial for like YouTube TV in the middle, and their whole pitch is like more than cable for less than cable. I'm like, wow, that's a pretty solid pitch
Yeah,
there.
you got me.
And I resonate with that a little bit, having sold
Yeah.
cable and satellite before. So, moral of the story here is don't buy anything that's above your means that you can afford. If you can afford it, go for it.
Yeah. If you learn one thing from Sky Harrison, it's don't buy cable.
Don't buy cable. I'm glad we finally arrived at
Yeah.
his actual moral for us.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
It's in there. It's between the lines. You just got to find it.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into some insights. Let's dig deep here. Let's open up the heart. Yeah, let's pour our souls out here. I want you to start us off on something that was really meaningful to you, something you took away from this book. We've already gone over a bunch, but give me something.
Okay. Well, I want to start out in terms of deep insights and applying this stuff into my life. I want to share a quote that I loved from Scott himself at the very end of the book. All right, I don't want to mess this up. So,
Yeah, action.
Action. He says, I've learned that no one is beyond redemption. Even if you think your past might disqualify you from a better future, I promise you, it's never too late to make a change. One day you'll look back, connect the dots, and see how your past was a necessary part of the journey. And I love that. I want to put that on my wall or something. I think it's inspiring. I think it's so true. Every now and then I'll, hear a story of someone that was in a career for a long time and then they went back to college later in life and completely changed it up and found success in a completely new field. Or, you'll hear a story like Scott's where he fell into a crowd that he didn't truly want to be in, but he was in it. And later in life, again, they figure their crap out and finally get to where they want to be. And while I feel very blessed with where I'm at in my life and what I've done, and also the goals and the plans that I have for the future, it is very encouraging to know that no matter what I do, right, there is a possibility for me to do better in the future. And it's very, very likely that the mistakes I'm making today are contributing to the person that I'll be tomorrow. And I think Scott is a model of using failure as a learning tool And that's something that I really want to apply in my life. Moving forward, like, I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to screw up at things. And the best thing I can do with that is learn from it. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I hope to apply. I would say I'm not perfect at it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, if I'm being honest. A little bit of a perfectionist. I'm a little bit of a know-it-all at times. Like, I don't like to be wrong. I don't like to tell
You
people
don't like
things
to
that
put
are
up
incorrect.
your blinds wrong and your curtains. Yeah.
It's a perfect example, man. If these curtains fall down behind me, it means that I installed them wrong and I'm an idiot. But like Sky Harrison says, no one is beyond redemption, and I'll be able to hang up curtains another day.
Absolutely. What a beautiful thought. I mean, it's in the title, redemption.
Yeah.
Redemption. Two thoughts going along what you said. You've inspired me. One is gratitude. Gratitude, expressing gratitude, being very conscious and deliberate with your gratitude. I listened to a video by Harry Mack. You know Harry Mack?
I do know Harry Mack.
Heck yeah, man.
He is so awesome.
Is he not the best? I genuinely think he's the best freestyle rapper of all time.
Rule number 1, you never skip a Harry Mack video, am I right?
If you know, you know, man. I'm so glad we are the same there. We never skip those videos.
He's the same TikTok algorithm for sure.
Yeah. For people who don't know, incredible freestyle rapper. I mean, you got to go look him up, Harry Mack. If he's listening, we love you. We appreciate you. Let's collab.
That would be wild, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. But he just released a video. He's in Portland. He's doing street raps. Someone comes up to him. They have their own TikTok channel. And they say, hey, I ask people what they love about being human. And he answers in the form of a rap, right? And there's just one line that really stood out to me. And it was, he was just talking about gratitude, being grateful for the little things. And he said, I opened up 2 gifts this morning. They were my eyes, right?
Dang. Bars.
Oh, bars. I mean, on the spot, it gave me chills.
Yeah.
And I just think about your message there. Be grateful for your mistakes. Be grateful for life. Be grateful to wake up. Be grateful for everything. And when you are grateful, those things that feel hard, even if it's opening your eyes, can become gifts, can become really powerful, can become pivotal moments in your story arc, you know, and your character. So that was awesome. And then one last thing, just about using faults and mistakes. It's really easy for those to be very hard to overcome. Thinking about our mistakes and things we've done and people we've hurt, we can feel like idiots. We can feel like that is a stain on our character. And I've just learned how to develop empathy for myself. And that has been a game changer. And you witnessed that in Scott's story. He developed empathy for himself. He wasn't making an excuse. He was saying, listen, I struggled with my childhood having to put up with all the rules that I had with taking care of my mom. He had to take off his clothes and shower and wash his clothes and wash his hands and scrub like it was a hospital to just go into his own living room.
Yeah.
Right. And that really, that cage felt suffocating. And so he reacted in a strong way and he went and became a nightclub promoter. Right.
Yeah.
But as he empathized with that experience and recognized where that was rooted in, it wasn't rooted in malice. It wasn't rooted in him being just an awful, selfish guy. It was rooted in something he could understand. And that turned this experience that he's become disgusted with one that he can be grateful for. Hey, I had this experience. It resulted in me becoming a little more selfish than I'd like to be, but it led to me changing and growing in a meaningful way. All this to say, as we empathize with ourselves, it's easier to forgive ourselves. And as we forgive ourselves, it's easier to grow. And that's what leads to these amazing moments. That's what leads to Scott's story. That's what leads to our story being beautiful and ending in us becoming the people we've always wanted to become, because we've learned to forgive ourselves and empathize with ourselves. Again, not making excuses, just giving ourselves the benefit of the doubt and going easy on ourselves. So
yeah, no, I love that, man. I think that's awesome. I have a question for you about gratitude. Okay. And the prompt behind this question comes from an experience that I think many people have had in their life, where let's say you were in first grade, second grade, in some random elementary school in America or Canada, wherever in the world you live, and you're eating your lunch, having a grand old time, eating your carrot sticks, and maybe they've got like, those like cheese stick bars that they had at school
Love them.
and stuff like that. Prime food. But you just don't quite finish all the food that you have there, and you're going to throw away, maybe half a cheese stick, and that kid like points at you and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you like a kid in Africa could eat that half a cheese stick. Like, why are you being so wasteful?" And like, you're ruining someone in Africa's life because you're throwing away that cheese stick. So my question is, how would you encourage people who still have that kind of mindset? Because I'm going to be honest, I think it's out there in plenty of adults today and children even, but who cares? They're children, they're learning. But let's talk about back to the adults here. Let's come back from elementary school and say, like, how can someone who feels that way about life in general, that everything we're doing is poor and a poor reflection on ourselves and what we think about those who are less fortunate, but how do you maintain gratitude while also being not just sensitive but truly caring about those who are less fortunate? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
What a killer question. I'm going to use one of my points here that I've written down to answer this. So it may feel a little off topic, but I'll connect it, or I'll try to.
All right.
And this was one of the biggest takeaways I had, because I was reading reviews of the book, and there were some concerns that Scott was using these stories to inspire Western America, to inspire the higher class, saying, "Oh, look at these poor souls! Isn't it so? Like, aren't we so lucky? We just need, we should feel so bad for them, and we should be so grateful for our water."
Almost to like push them up socially, right? To be like, "Oh my gosh, like I can't believe that people live like that."
Exactly. That is not the purpose of their suffering. The purpose of their suffering is not to inspire us. It's not to make us feel bad for them. They don't need pity. They don't want to be put on billboards. And imagine if you are suffering, you are starving for food, you have no clean water, and someone walks up to you and says, "This is terrible. Let me take a picture of you, put it on this billboard so all these people who do have those things can feel bad for you." You think that's what
even
they
feel better
want?
about themselves, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's not the purpose of suffering. They are brilliant, fun, compassionate human beings who were put in a situation that was unlike ours. And our goal is to help them. Help them be more themselves, really.
Yeah.
And we can't be upset that we are living in a place that doesn't have those problems, because this is the goal.
Yeah.
We are lucky, and this is what we want to have happen. We want to have a society where there is clean water. So congratulations. I mean, this is a massive achievement in human history, that there is an entire country, or at least a majority of this country is drinking clean water. That is where we want to be. So we can't take away from that. We can't think that that's a bad thing. That is the goal, right?
Yeah. And I would say even like, sorry, just to butt in for a sec, like true gratitude doesn't take away from that.
Yes.
Just because I'm grateful for the hand that I've been dealt doesn't mean that I inherently, like, I can't care about those who were dealt a different hand.
Absolutely.
Simply because I am where I am. It goes both ways. So anyway, continue.
Absolutely. And I do worry that some people who have this feeling of, what's wrong with us? How could I flush a toilet with clean water when there's other people who need it? I do worry that there's a little bit of pride in there. There's a bit of, these poor souls are beneath me and I need to reach down my hand and help them up. That is not reality. These guys are amazing individuals. These populations, these countries are incredible. They just so happen to not have this need that we have, right? And if we were in their situation, we'd be exactly the same, right? And we'd want help. We wouldn't want pity. So, in a roundabout way, that's my thought on this. We should be grateful for our circumstance because it's amazing. It's incredible. This is a massive achievement, again, in human history, for us to be so lucky, right? And for us to have all these accommodations. That doesn't take away from their need for help. It doesn't take away from their incredible achievements. It doesn't take away from their brilliance and their compassion. That's just something that I had this profound feeling of when I was reading this book was these people are incredible. They don't need pity. They just need someone who has a little bit more of a different resource to help them, right?
I think
what are your thoughts on that?
That's something that Scott illustrates perfectly in my mind, is how the money itself actually goes to solve the problem. Because, the problem isn't that I can turn on my faucet and get water and that water can't make it to Africa, right? Like, that's not the problem. And I think foolishly for many years, and, probably when I was a kid having that experience in elementary school, that's probably what your brain thinks of. It's like, oh yeah, if only there was a way that I could ship this water or this half a cheese stick over to Africa and really help out someone that needs it. But that's not really the issue at hand here. And one thing that I think is most admirable about Scott's efforts in his charity specifically is their commitment to long-lasting, life-changing efforts in the countries in the best way that they need them. He talks a lot about drilling wells because that is, in many places, the best way for people to get access to clean water. But it doesn't work everywhere. And so while he talks about wells, he also mentions, he's like, hey, depending on the country, depending on the town, and depending on what the elders of that town need for their community to receive the clean water, we work with them to determine the best possible way. So it's about, that's why the money is so important with this charity specifically, is because the water that I have in this bottle right here, this isn't the water that's going to help someone, obviously. But $10 from my wallet every month actually could help someone receive the means to access that resource. So thanks for indulging my question there. I think that it's something that makes so much sense in hindsight, but I remember having that thought while I was reading. I was like, this puts a spin on the whole, what does charity actually mean, and why do charities ask for money in the first place? So
what you've shared is so brilliant. It's spot on. It's so true. And I had similar thoughts, and that's kind of what branched into what I shared, is just, that feeling of the cheese stick. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this cheese stick, right? So we don't want to feel guilty. We don't want to feel, we're not to lessen ourselves to raise them up.
And obviously we still want to be reasonable, and we don't want to be wasteful just to be wasteful. That's not gratitude, right? If we are wasteful for the blessings that we have, we aren't really grateful for them. So I think that there's a fine balance there. And so I would encourage people to think about that a little bit and think about the way that you can actually cause some good locally as well as with, greater causes like charity water.
I have one last insight, if you don't mind me sharing.
Okay, let's do that, and then I want to hear your recommendation on this book.
Yes, absolutely. Love is a process of expansion, right? And that kind of sounds silly, but it's an expanding experience. Compassion and love is not a finite resource. And Scott shares this brilliant analogy, and I cannot remember where he got it from, so forgive me, but he talks about how he thought he was on an island. When we're born, we think we're on an island, and this island represents our capacity to love, right? And we think it's, again, just this finite resource. I'm going to give my family this section of the island. I'm going to give my friends this section. This section's for, fictional characters or whatever, like
Yeah.
I've got this little island. I'm going to divvy it up, and if I need to allocate some different resources, I can do that too. And then he uses the example of having a child to explain, when you have your first child, another island appears out of nowhere. And this is new love that you can have for this new child. And he just talks about how that's such a brilliant, stunning experience to realize, oh my gosh, this island is not all the love that I can experience. Because experiencing love for someone is a wonderful experience. I dare say it's one of the purposes of life. It's to experience love for other people. It fills your soul with purpose and meaning. It's exactly what we need as human beings. So it's a wonderful experience as well to see that you have more love.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, then you have a second child and another island appears, and you realize there's so much possibility, that you have so much more capacity for love. Now take that for strangers instead of children, which of course we're going to expand our love for children. You can have that same experience with strangers, with people who are suffering, with people who have shared their stories, and you start to empathize with them and you feel an expansion of love. Again, love is so infinite. You can become full of love for everyone in the world. It's possible. It's truly possible. That's not to say you agree with them. That's not to say you support their decisions. It's just to say you love them and you want the best for them and you want them to succeed and you wish that they could be happy. That thought was so beautiful for me. And again, it helped me. Now I go to the store and I've always been personable and try to be friendly, but now I go to the store and I talk to the cashier and I'm like, what's hurting you? How can I love you more? And all of a sudden my trip to the grocery store is meaningful.
Yeah.
And I'm happier. And so again, that just was such a special takeaway from this book for me was, love is not finite, it's infinite, and it's a beautiful part of life.
That is awesome. What a stellar note to end it on. I think that is something we all need to take notes on. We could all learn a little bit about love from Bobby here. So, but before we tie it all up, let's talk just briefly. If we were to recommend this book to somebody who hasn't read it, what would you say? Give it a score. 10 out of 10? 9 out of 10?
It's a 10. It's a 10 out of 10. And I think we both agree that, the experience of trying to come up with something we didn't like about it and not being able to is evidence that this was a 10 out of 10 book. It's one for the history books. It's one to be remembered. It's one for the articles. It's one to talk about. Read it as soon as you can.
Yeah. And it is not a bore. It is very interesting. Yeah. It's engaging. It's inspiring. And it's honestly a quick read. I think it was just about 300 pages. And most of the people that I knew that read it, they would tell me that they were reading it. And then just like a week or two later, they're like, oh yeah, I finished it. Cool.
Yep.
Glad that you sped through it, because it does not let you forget about the message that it has to share. It reads like an engaging novel and definitely had some life-changing perspectives that you and I have both talked about today.
Yeah.
So, anything else to add there about the book?
No. Just go read it. Just go read it and experience that opening of eyes, and just feel it all.
Awesome.
So,
well, to do a little bit of housekeeping here at the end of our episode.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks for listening this far. If you've made it this far, it's been a wonderful hour. But we are going to announce our next book, which is, drum roll please. Thank you. It is called Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. It's by, I think you say it, Giles Milton? Giles? I think it's Giles.
Probably Giles, yeah.
Giles has better mouthfeel, so we'll stick with Giles.
We strugble with author names, don't we?
Sometimes.
Sweetenham.
People
Giles.
Just have normal names, dang it. It would be... No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I'm going to read you the back of the book text here and get a little context.
Please.
Hopefully get a little whiff of the beautiful smells that will be in this book, if that makes any sense at all. In the spring of 1939, a top secret organization was founded in London. Its purpose was to plot the destruction of Hitler's war machine through spectacular acts of sabotage. The guerrilla campaign that followed was every bit as extraordinary as the 6 men who directed it. One of them, Cecil Clarke, was a maverick engineer who had spent the 1930s inventing futuristic caravans. Now his talents were put to a more devious use. He built the dirty bomb used to assassinate Hitler's favorite, Reinhard Heydrich. Another, William Fairbairn, was a portly pensioner with an unusual passion. He was the world's leading expert in silent killing, hired to train the guerrillas being parachuted behind enemy lines. Led by dapper Scotsman Colin Gubbins, these men, along with 3 others, formed a secret inner circle that, aided by a group of formidable ladies, single-handedly changed the course of the Second World War. A cohort handpicked by Winston Churchill, whom he called his Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. So, a little bit of a different book here. This is more of a history book. It's true, right? It is true stuff, but it seemed interesting to us as it's a little bit of the less known behind the scenes type stuff in World War II, which is a very real and very tragic event in the world's history. So there's definitely lots to learn from it. I think there are countless things that people already have learned from the war itself and every war, but also the specific stories that happened during World War II, which is one of the more notable, world events. So I love history. I'm a history buff. I'm super stoked to dip our toes into the history pool a little bit in Cardinal Corner. What are you feeling? Are you excited?
Oh, I'm so excited. It was so clear to us when we were trying to pick the next book that we needed to do a history book. And when we found this one, it just clicked,
Yeah, I remember feeling that too. I was like, man, like this, I want to read this. That's basically where this came from. We were very selfish when we picked these books. It's like, I really want to read that. So let's pick that one.
Yeah. And one last thing as well is I've started reading it already, and
nice.
It's got some brilliant insights. It's really, there's a lot to learn from their courage, from their fearlessness, from the collaboration. Again, these themes are going to be really fun to talk about, stuff that we haven't really talked about yet on this podcast or in this book club. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
I'm so hyped. I just got the book, so I'm starting tomorrow. But yeah, that's pretty much all we got in terms of closing announcements. Obviously, if you want to donate to Charity Water, I feel comfortable enough to say that we definitely support that. It is an amazing cause. Knowing the story behind it makes every donation, I think, feel more meaningful for me. So the website that they have is charitywater.org. Obviously, if you haven't bought the book already, you can just buy the book, and that's essentially a donation to that charity. Yeah, all of the proceeds from the book go to that charity. But yeah, having said that, thanks for listening to this episode of Cardinal Corner Podcast. If you did enjoy it, if you learned something, make sure you follow us here on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Make sure that you also check out our social media for any new little videos we're posting. We've got some plans, and we actually are going to do a giveaway of this next book, which is very exciting. That'll be posted probably this week. Still working out the details, but it'll have probably on Instagram and will be the main place. I think that we'll count the entries for this giveaway, but check everywhere. We're going to talk about it everywhere, and we would love to give you the next book so that you can read it along with us for free. But above all of that, aside from the giveaway and aside from this awesome conversation that we've had today, don't forget that we freaking love you, and we're grateful for you listening.